so far, and so let's endeavor to keep it that way. Have people been enjoying so far? Good symposium, excuse me. Enjoying the symposium? Oh, good. So a few more people coming in.
I'm here because I noticed on the cover of the program, everyone in the pictures is white. Yeah.
So thank you all for joining our breakout session, the equity serving the whole community. That's this session here, and my name is Woody Hastings. I work with the Center for Climate Protection. I'm sitting. I prefer to stand actually, but I'm sitting so I can read my notes here. With the Center for Climate Protection, that's putting on the symposium today. The question that we're endeavoring to answer for this panel session is, how can community choice programs work to include progressive labor practices and environmental justice goals while supporting businesses that give back to the community? And we'll do our best to answer that question, and certainly to answer any other questions you might have. Looking forward to that part of the program. That is really my favorite part of these kind of sessions. And just a brief introduction by name of the panelists. I'll introduce each one in more detail before they give their introductory remarks. But we have Gavriella Keyles here from RE-volv, Dolores Weller from the Central Valley Air Quality Coalition, and Ken Smokaska, who wears a number of hats, but he's the president of the California Renewable Energy Solutions and Technologies, but also very much involved with labor and other issues. So, who am I? Why was I asked to help moderate this panel? I've been with the Center for Climate Protection for about 6 years now, working on community choice primarily, but my background involves work with statewide organization Communities for a Better Environment back in the late 80s, early 90s, working largely to protect the public from exposure to toxics. I worked with a Latino elected official, City of LA, for about 4 years on dealing with landfill issues in that low-income community. They're largely Latino, about 70% Latino community, so there's environmental justice issues that were hitting that community. I also helped the South Coast Air Quality Management District, the big air pollution control district in Southern California, institute their first environmental justice program back in the late 90s. And then my degree is in environmental sustainability and social justice, so I have a bit of background and involvement and work with this over the years. Really the common thread through my career has been public participation. So I'm really interested in policies and programs that that advance public involvement in policy. So that's sort of how I've ended up with community choice, because it's such an excellent means, a vehicle for increasing public participation in these public policy decisions. About community choice relative to environmental justice issues that low-income communities and communities of color face, it's not a panacea. It doesn't solve every problem. There are all kinds of issues and problems that these communities face that community choice is not going to be something that really remedies those. But there are certain basic elements of community choice that do serve to help that. The one I've already mentioned, which is public participation. Community choice programs are public, and so the public has an opportunity to actually show up and weigh in and say, hey, we need some help here. We have an economy that's suffering. We need jobs. That kind of programs and policies that can bring jobs. So there's that piece of it. The statutes that created community choice provide that the programs that already exist, like the CARE program in the PG&E service territory that provides for low-income folks, that stays the same. So it doesn't impact those kinds of programs and other public service type programs. The statutes also require equal treatment throughout the service territory for a community choice program, things like that. Community choice necessarily brings consumer choice. And so that's a benefit for all communities. Then we see things that are not necessarily part of community choice, but in the proof in the pudding in the ones that exist where you have lower rates. So the potential for lower rates in any community choice program, and that can certainly help low-income folks, and potential for jobs and other local economic development. Ultimately, it's really about energy democracy, bringing more people into the process. And in my view, over the years, what I've seen, when more people are involved in decision making, you have a better outcome. Better programs, better policies, better projects, whatever it might be. If there's more people involved, it might take longer. Sometimes it takes longer. Sometimes it's usually more difficult, but it usually ends up with a better policy where more stakeholders benefit and more folks are served. So that's my sort of initial framing on community choice. I will now introduce each of our panelists to give a 10 minute or so introductory remarks. And I think we can just, why don't we start with Gabby? I'll give Gabby, we'll just go in this order here. So Gabby's initial interest in sustainability and climate change was sparked by a half-year stint in the Middle East, culminating in research on environmental engagement and communication in Morocco's capital city. Prior to joining the RE-volv team, Gabby worked with the Farm Journal Foundation in Washington, D.C. and Spark Ventures in Chicago. Gabby developed and manages RE-volv's Solar Ambassador program and spearheads RE-volv's solar projects nationally. Gabby holds a bachelor's degree from Northwestern University School of Communication. So Gabby, your opening remarks. What's that?
Stand up, please.
It's up to you.
Sure. Well, hi everyone. It's great to be here. I'm really thrilled to be speaking on this panel with Ken and Dolores. And as Woody mentioned, my background stems heavily in the social impact space, and I think that there's a really important intersection between the social sector and the renewable energy sector. I actually started at RE-volv about a year and a half ago through a year-long nonprofit professional development fellowship, which includes rigorous training for the social sector. So for me, equity is what the sort of sustainability field is about and my participation in it. So I'm very much a mission-driven individual, and RE-volv is a mission-driven organization as well. So what is RE-volv? I'm sure some of you are asking. We are a 501c3 nonprofit based in downtown San Francisco with a mission to empower people and communities to take action on climate change by crowdfunding solar projects in communities across the country. And I'll break that down a little bit. So what we do is we help nonprofits and cooperatives around the country gain access to financing for rooftop solar installations. And the three pillars of our mission that we like to say are empower, invest, and educate. So the way that we finance these systems is very much community-based. So the first step is we crowdfund tax-deductible donations from people around the country and around the world to finance the upfront costs for a solar installation for one of these community-serving nonprofits or co-ops. We sign a 20-year lease with each nonprofit and co-op that we work with, and as they pay us back over 20 years, we reinvest all of those funds into new projects, creating a revolving fund for solar in communities. And this fund grows and grows over time because it takes advantage of compound interest, so that by the time we hit around 200 projects, the fund should actually be self-sustaining and we wouldn't need to crowdfund another dollar. That being said, we would still want to crowdfund a little bit because, as I mentioned, a big aspect of our work is empowering people to take part in the clean energy revolution. So if you can't go solar at home because you're a renter or you can't afford it or there's a tree over your house, you can still participate in putting solar up in communities and specifically on the places that we care about. We have completed 3 projects in the Bay Area so far. So we've done the Shaw Anderson Dance Center in Berkeley, a 10 kilowatt system, a 22 kilowatt system for the Keyles Community Synagogue in Oakland, and a 32 kilowatt system for the Other Avenues Food Cooperative, which is in the Outer Sunset neighborhood of San Francisco. And right now, we're actually expanding nationally through the Solar Ambassador program that Woody mentioned, which is my program. And we are currently working in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Wisconsin, and Southern California, and are likely to expand to South Carolina and Connecticut this coming year. So we're very excited about that. And a big part of that expansion is that just last week we actually launched our very own crowdfunding platform. So we're not using Indiegogo or anything like that, but we have a platform that is serving as a hub for these sorts of projects. So let me talk a little bit about the Solar Ambassador Program for a second, and then I want to dive into why I think this particular model allows us to reach underserved communities, work in all of these different states where, when you think of Wisconsin and Ohio, you don't immediately think solar, but we're happy to be working there. So the Solar Ambassador Program is a year-long fellowship for college students that trains them to use our model to build these community solar projects in their own communities nearby their campuses. So we have an in-person retreat in the Bay Area, we do bi-weekly webinars, and it's a very intensive mentoring program where we teach them, what does it take to work with a community organization to help them go solar? How do you reach out to them and convince them about the benefits of solar? How do you work with a local installer to come up with a quote? How do you choose a good quote? And then the next part is, how do you engage your community with solar on the ground? How do you teach people about it, get them excited about it so that you can hit these crowdfunding targets? So, our alternative financing model allows us to reach communities that are not currently being served by the solar market. And I think, as I was thinking about this panel, I was thinking that, underserved communities doesn't only mean individuals, it means businesses as well. So when we think about nonprofits and co-ops, this is a market, we work really between the 5 and 35 kilowatt range. This is a market being totally ignored by other traditional solar financing mechanisms for a few reasons. One, it's really difficult for these organizations to prove their creditworthiness. 2 is that they can't take advantage of the ITC. And 3 is that the projects are really small, so they generally don't pencil out for larger companies. But I think it's really important that these really vital community services, so right now we have projects in the works that are, homeless shelters or community service organizations in low-income neighborhoods. Clean power shouldn't be reserved for only the folks who can afford it. It shouldn't be reserved for the highest income counties in the country. It should be for all of these organizations. And not only are we providing solar financing for the roofs of these buildings, but what we're doing is we're educating people that these community organizations serve about solar energy and bringing them into the conversation about solar. So when I think we talk about equity, it's not just about who's getting solar, but it's also who's in the conversation, who's in the movement about renewable energy. Because it shouldn't just be limited to one group of people or a few groups of people. It should be a national conversation and a national interest. And I think one of the biggest barriers to entry for solar is a lack of knowledge. So that's one thing that we really focus on, is educating communities, saying this is affordable, here are ways that it can be affordable for you. And then if it's not, or if it's not possible, then you can still help bring renewable energy to communities through our model. And I think that our model also allows us to take risks, so we can go to underserved communities, lower income areas, because we're not as focused on a profit margin because we're a nonprofit ourselves. And we like to say that instead of paying us back over time, these community organizations are actually paying it forward because their leases are going to help other communities go solar around the United States. So that's a bit of an overview of RE-volv, and looking forward to answering more questions.
Thanks very much, Gabby. We'll go to Dolores next. As the director of the Central Valley Air Quality Coalition, Dolores serves as a leader of a 70-plus member organization, coalition, committed to improving air quality in the San Joaquin Valley. Knowledgeable on air pollution and its impacts, she's an advocate for public health, especially addressing the needs of environmental justice communities. In her 6 years with the coalition, she's proven to be a catalyst for local air quality policy change. So take it away, Dolores.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Dolores Sweller from the Central Valley Air Quality Coalition, like Woody said. And we are basically a watchdog organization that advocates for public health through implementing policy change at our local air district. We also work with the EPA and the State Air Resources Board, but I would say 90% of our work is targeted at our local air district. Meeting with air district directors, meeting with the air board members, local electeds, the public, and our primary role as a leader of our 70-plus member coalition is to educate our member organizations that are working on a variety of social justice issues. Many of them are not specifically working on air quality, maybe they're working on, food justice, other social justice issues in their communities, and we kind of serve as the glue to rally them around specific air quality issues targeted at our local air district. And one of our priorities is to advocate for environmental justice communities. And if you're not familiar with the San Joaquin Valley, we have our fair share. The Cal EPA's Enviro screening tool has identified where those most impacted communities are in the state, and many of them are in our San Joaquin Valley. And many of our coalition members that work in the community, in the actual impacted communities, really help us elevate those localized impacts to really influence the policy at the local air district and other air agencies as well. And I would say, when we're talking about energy and environmental justice issues, I would probably highlight most of the work that our partners are doing in Kern County, which is the southernmost county in the San Joaquin Valley, and where there's plenty of oil production going on, and it really creates an unlivable environment for communities. For example, in Shafter, there's an elementary school with about 100 wells within a mile distance of a school, many of which have been fracked. And where CVAC comes in, our coalition comes in, is we're really at the policy level. There are just, there's a myriad of issues with the activity that's going on in Kern County. Some of it are related to the oil sumps themselves, where the wastewater is ending up, and we have these sumps that are basically giving off emissions near our communities. Many have been discovered to be unlined and tainting groundwater. And so obviously this is an industry with a lot of power. In our communities, many times the challenge that we have is these companies come into these communities with the idea of bringing jobs to our residents, and so it's really hard to break that mentality for residents to understand that there are healthy jobs. As you know, environmental justice communities, a lot of terrible zoning practices have placed these types of facilities, rendering plants, oil fields, you name it, any type of polluting industry usually ends up in a community of color. And within the general planning process of each city and county, you will find some of those zoning laws that have existed over the years that really perpetuate those type of facilities existing in those communities, and residents really have grown accustomed to thinking that is our industry, that's the backbone of our community, and those are the types of jobs that we can really take advantage of. So there is a lot of education that goes along with that from our partners, and I'd say that our advocates, our member organizations are really the defense, defending our residents, bringing their voices to, whether it's the air district or a local elected body. There's language isolation, there's, low education, poverty rates, unemployment rates. And so there are so many barriers. And so our advocates really serve as the people that can bring those voices to the table. And just kind of give you another energy example is the biomass industry in our valley. As you know, we're an agricultural area, and so we have a lot of waste from our orchards and all of the agricultural production. And the biomass facilities take in this waste, and with historically with renewable energy credits, have been able to pay farmers, growers, to turn in this waste, and it's burned in a biomass facility. And while it's cleaner than open burning, what we did 10, 15 years ago, it's still not the cleanest possible way. And there are alternatives that we are pushing along with advocates to push our local air district to really be the leader and implement some of those cleaner air ag waste practices. But as you might be aware, we have tremendous challenge in our valley with just politics in general. We have very difficult time. Our Air District Director and many local electeds are supporting that particular industry and are seeking legislation to keep it alive. And in doing so, we've been seeing a lot of open burning. So it's really sad to see that what we did 10, 15 years ago is happening again, and we've made so much progress with agricultural waste, and now we're burning it again because we can't keep the biomass industry alive. So there's really an opportunity there for our local leaders to get involved with clean energy practices that'll help the backbone of our economy, our agricultural system there in the valley. And ultimately our goal is obviously to impact the air quality, and we do so also through working on air quality development plans. We were very fortunate in 2015 we were able to change the process in which the local air district develops their air quality plans. And so now, thanks to our coalition, we were able to change the process and bring various stakeholders from environmental justice communities, from the business industry. So you have, Western States Petroleum Association sitting next to someone who works in, an EJ community. And you have someone from the Air Resources Board and EPA all working on the specific plans that, are federally mandated based on health and science to get us to where we want to go. But like I said, we have a lot of challenges. We spend a lot of time defending concepts like, the Clean Air Act, for example. Our local air district is touring the nation at the moment to weaken the Clean Air Act. And we definitely don't want to, take any steps back, and any changes to the Clean Air Act would really, impact our health and environmental justice communities, especially. I think that was pretty much it.
Well, thank you very much, Dolores. Just still taking notes from something you
Okay,
said.
sorry.
No, it's fine. So we will now move to our final presenter, Ken Smokaska. And Ken, thanks for being here. Ken has been active with formation of community choice programs across California. While chair of Sierra Club California's Energy Climate Change Committee, Ken helped community organizing efforts in Marin County, Sonoma, San Francisco communities, and elsewhere. Ken has participated in proceedings at the California Public Utilities Commission, at the California Energy Commission, in the areas of community choice, smart grid, distributed generation, and distributed, is that demand response? Yeah. And workforce development. Ken has worked with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, locals, and the National Electrical Contractors Association chapters to develop community choice agencies for over 10 years, while representing labor management cooperation committees across the state. So Ken, please give us sort of a labor perspective on community choice and how the two can maybe interact.
Well, it's been a bit conflicted over the years. Just briefly to explain, IBEW has locals in each county in the state. The utilities have IBEW locals also, PG&E, SoCal Edison, and San Diego Gas and Electric. So internally there's been huge conflicts, but on the local level there's been a tremendous amount of support for community choice, and it hasn't transpired as well, but for the last year now I've been working in Los Angeles County and 14 cities in the South Bay, and we've got solid labor contractor support working in that effort. And it goes back to, was it 2002, the law passed, and in 2003, Sierra Club California said, this is an excellent policy, let's promote it. And so that's what I did. Like Woody said, I was thinking about Supervisor McGlashan being such a pioneer and being in his office with Don Weiss 10, 11 years ago trying to make this happen, and it took 4 or 5 years before they could implement their program. I think back to in San Luis Obispo, I was able to be one of the project leads in developing almost 1,000 megawatts of solar. But what it had is a green jobs component. So to get into the equity there, we had a pre-apprenticeship program, and I'll explain apprenticeship programs in just a minute, but those pre-apprenticeship programs, we took 3 different levels of potential workers. The first one was basically unemployed, long-term unemployment, year plus. A lot of handicaps for their employment, but we were able to still place about half of those folks in projects. The next revision of that, we refined the recruitment a little bit. We placed 100%. And the third class, we placed 100%. And a bunch of guys and gals were installing solar in the San Luis Obispo Valley there. And what that really brought back to me is that equity is, I was a foster dad in San Diego County for about 10 years. And when I first learned of an equity problem was when the kids emancipated. When they turn 18 or close to it, they emancipate into the real world. But those services that were promised to them, housing, continuing education, and so forth, yeah, they had a year plus waiting period. So again, with the jobs, I thought, well, I worked on creating a trade tech program with a charter school. And we were able to create it with the building trades down there where kids were learning the different trades. They weren't only just learning the different trades, they were actually rehabbing houses that they could live in. So that was part of the education and environmental justice that I really kind of worked on. Get back to apprenticeship programs. The state and the federal government has spent maybe $1 billion on workforce development in the green technology over the last 5 years. And the CPUC's had proceedings for the last 7 years on workforce education and training for a green economy. And the UC Berkeley Don Vial's Labor Center worked with the CPUC under contract and identified the gaps. Because what was happening is this training was going fine, but it was mainly going into solar. And it was just a one track as opposed, so you got a job installing solar, but like in Nevada, all the solar manufacturers, all the installers just pulled out. So now all those guys and gals that were installing solar, what are they doing now? They didn't really have a training and a career. If they had been trained as electricians, sheet metal workers, plumbers, then they were doing that one specific component, but then they wouldn't be able to, they're able to transition into another job. And when we're hearing most of the speakers talking about we want to integrate our grid, we want to have smart microgrids, we want to have zero net energy communities, we want to have, what else? Demand response, energy efficiency. Well, those are high quality jobs. That's a career. That's, you can start off doing home energy efficiency, and you can maybe do some residential solar installations, but you really need more training to take it to the next level. Not only do you need more training, the technology is growing so fast that for this to really happen, you have to have a good quality workforce. And you want to have a good quality workforce that has a livable wage. So you want to pay those folks well as well. I was just thinking about the training center for the IBEW NECA in Alameda. It's a zero net energy facility. It was a warehouse facility that they retrofitted to zero net energy. The Los Angeles training facility called Electrical Training Institute, and it really is a university level institute because when you're looking at integration with the utilities for that smart grid, it's high level journeymen doing that type of work. So you really want them on board. That facility is going to be more than zero net energy. It's going to be producing energy about 30% of their load. So they're at about 130% with wind, solar, and then really the foundation is energy efficiency. So all the community choice programs, there's been some gaps. I wouldn't say it's the fault of the community choice aggregators or Marin or Sonoma. I think it was PG&E that put so much pressure on them, they didn't have time to develop the programs that really needed to be developed. What we're doing now is designing this from the ground floor. If we design it from the ground floor and have the workforce in place to do it, then it's achievable. Energy efficiency is cheaper than any of the renewables that are out there. So if you start there, I'll give you one example. There's a California Advanced Lighting Controls program that was developed with UC Davis, about 20 different lighting manufacturers, and IBEW NECA. And it's a training program that deals with both the workers doing the work, the middle management, and senior management. So you get buy-in from all of them to implement that program. That's achieving 50 to 60% savings in energy efficiency in the lighting sector. And the lighting sector in commercial is about 45% of the energy load in most buildings. So, you know, this building, I mean, this room here, I don't see much opportunity with like daylighting. But part of the control systems, like in all the lighting that right around this whole exterior, it's not controlled most likely. I don't know about this facility actually. But if you can harvest that daylighting, that's conservation. So that's the most cost effective, and then the efficiency. So, well, we're going to do it in a big way in Los Angeles. Part of the dynamics is we're real fortunate that Supervisor Hilda Solis in the 1st District was Secretary of Labor. She understands that labor and the workforce development and how it's really the gaps and how it's being implemented. She's going to be a champion. Her staff is working tirelessly on putting this into the foundation. And then the second thing that we got a really cool thing is we're actually going to go into some of the communities in Carson and Inglewood and Compton, and we're identifying local contractors to organize them and to train them. So we're going to take contractors that typically wouldn't qualify, and we're setting up a special program so those local jobs can stay in that community. And that combined with like a helmets to hard hat program that we have for returning veterans is really putting that environmental justice, you know, where it needs to be.
Great, thanks Ken, and thanks all. We're going to get to your questions really soon. Before we do, I've got lots of questions. So, but what I'd like to try to do first is to look at what are the common denominators among the various communities. And I was thinking, Dolores, maybe you could help us further frame this. Maybe some of it is really already fairly evident from what we've heard. But being in a coalition of 70 plus organizations in one of the most impacted parts of the state, and economically challenged parts of the state. So let's talk a little bit more about some of the things that are common, and with sort of in the context, things that maybe can potentially relate to community choice. Sure. So we've talked about jobs and local economic development. That clearly, I think, is one. So maybe just a few others.
Yeah, I think the two that I can think of are unmet basic needs and investing, bringing down, funding streams or investing funds in EJ communities, prioritizing them are two of the issues that I see across the board with my coalition members. What I mean by unmet needs is that many times when we have new concepts, and I'll give a good example would be like high-speed rail, for example. Our coalition is kind of divided on the issue and hasn't really taken a position on it because we feel there are some EJ issues, and that some of our EJ communities don't have sidewalks, bike lanes, or local bus infrastructure to begin with, and so we're not quite there yet. It's really hard for us to work with advocates in other parts of the state on big issues like that because we still haven't met those basic needs. We have a lot of unincorporated communities in our valley that don't have clean drinking water. They're isolated in so many ways linguistically. Rural communities that aren't connected to the city hub, lack of transportation. As we talked about some of the characteristics of environmental justice communities as well early on. So I think those basic unmet needs are an issue. A lot of the organizations that we work with work against sprawl. We are a vast valley with plenty of land, and so a lot of our communities just kind of get neglected and new communities are developed. And so our resources are diverted, and those communities that are left behind are mostly communities of color, and a lot of farm worker communities as well. And I would say with investing funds, there are a lot of funding streams that we talk about within the EJ communities, whether it's greenhouse gas reduction funds, local dollars that are intended to impact a county or air district funds, and really tracking those dollars and making sure that they impact the environmental justice community. I'll give the example of our air district's DMV fees. We pay an additional $24 on our registration, and those are supposed to go back into environmental justice communities. And that, I want to say it's almost a 10-year bill that was introduced by Senator Arambula, and we to date have not seen where exactly that money has gone. In West Fresno, how many buses were retrofitted? We know that the funding is going towards ag pumps, buses, heavy-duty diesel trucks. We know that there's categories and how much money has been put on the entire pot, but we don't know how the communities that we work in, how they've really been impacted. And a lot of those programs require matching funds. So you might have a community that really needs, those school buses, but doesn't have the matching funds to bring that clean air technology to their community. So I would say funding streams and unmet needs, meeting those kind of unmet needs before you kind of take the big step into some of these luxuries, I would say.
Very good. But we've got about a half an hour left, and I do want to have plenty of time for questions. I just wanted to sort of put one out there that's sort of a longer term, as we Center for Climate Protection begin to do work in the San Joaquin Valley, and we're very pleased to be able to do that. Really looking at Dolores mentioned water quality issues, and we know that there's a connection between fracking and water quality issues, and being about air quality, the entire fossil era has us driving around in petroleum-based vehicles, and if community choice can be a part of, over the long term, taking us away from natural gas extraction, fracking, that kind of thing, and can help electrify our transportation system, that helps with certainly Center for Climate Protection's main mission, main driving purpose, which is greenhouse gas reduction, but closely related is the air quality, air that you actually breathe. So these two things. So there's some immediate things that I think can happen, or nearer term things, and then long term things. And so I'm looking at developing some of these ideas about how community choice can really, in the near term and the long term, help the communities in the Central Valley. So I do want to open it up to your questions. So, and we don't need to do cards or anything like that. So if folks just want to raise their hands and go ahead. And if it's directed to a specific panelist, let us know.
So thank you to the panelists. I appreciate all your insights and perspectives that you bring. I think this is an item that is not often talked enough about, and is one that is very important.
And maybe if each of us state our name and if you want an affiliation, not necessarily. It's okay.
My name is Justin Levesque, and I work with the City of San Jose. I'm an environmental specialist, and I was part of the team that worked on the community choice aggregation memo at the council this past Tuesday. So again, thank you for being here. My question is for Dolores, but maybe anybody else too that would like to put some ideas in. One of the buzz terms that's going around right now is resiliency and adaptation. And with our environmental justice groups in the underserved populations, they're more at risk as climate is changing, especially during high heat events. One way that we can help manage that is with energy efficiency, resiliency within a building envelope. If a building is insulated well, it will perform longer if there's a power outage during a hot heat spell, and then that's a place that you can be in place and you're not worried about overheating, especially for vulnerable populations that might not have access to cooling, or if the elderly population or hospitals as well. I'm wondering if there's other items like that that you're interested in that maybe you can educate us on, or other things that you're interested in that area.
Is your question, you're saying resilience type programs for communities?
Yeah, so I'm trying to figure out different ways that CCA might be able to help the environmental justice populations, such as providing better quality buildings and doing home weatherization type programs that have these added benefits.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about the basic unmet needs, and really seeing if there's an opportunity for community choice to somehow address those unmet needs. We are also an agricultural community, so there's a list of activities that go on within each farm, or it's kind of funny calling them farms because they're enormous, but everything from, because of the drought, we're drilling more water, and so there's a lot of diesel pumps running on all of these acres of land, and so if we could go towards solar, incentivize growers that are being impacted by the drought to invest in some of these technologies, and so if community choice could kind of bridge that and really keep that in perspective, I would say that's part of the learning process and education of it.
And I should add, for folks that don't know, community choice agencies do have the statutory authority to engage to receive the public funds that are made available. Everybody already pays them. And so there's definitely, clearly, the renewable energy side. There's also the energy efficiency side that community choice agencies can help on. And so I see, Beth, do you have a question?
And I just wanted to touch on that because I think that, so my name is Beth Kelly, I'm the general counsel at MCP. One of our so we've applied for funding from the CPUC for energy efficiency programs, and actually one of our most successful partnerships in that area is with multi-unit low-income housing, because there's definitely an unmet need in that area. And the synergy is amazing because you can go in and you can retrofit 200, 400, 600, 800 units at a time, and really have a huge positive impact for that community and be cost effective at the same time. So those types of components, and just from the workforce development, it's like all of our programs have workforce development components integrated into it. And so whether it's workforce training and sort of the soup to nuts, like what's that pathway, that's definitely something our customer programs director is really focused on. So that helps.
Thank you. Craig, did you have a question?
I had a sort of a general one, probably ignorance pointing out, but can a CCA in one locale, is there a seamless way to work with another CCA to CCA?
Oh, certainly they can collaborate with each other and also with other munis, publicly owned utilities, collaboration. And there's several other sort of public, well, look, I mean, actually your question would probably need to be sort of narrowed in a little bit more, because they, by definition, collaborate with the investor-owned utility, right?
The regional energy networks, there's one in the Bay Area and one in Southern California. They actually can provide a lot of those bridging umbrella services. We'd be happy to.
Well, if I might just throw another one in, I've been trying to get my head around community choice or community solar. And here you've got an agriculture community that has lots of real estate, and lots of real estate with large buildings and in a perfect sun region. And then you've got Sonoma, where we've got a high penetration of industrial buildings, and a lot of them are not perfectly suited, or take Oakland, for an example. And it seems like that's a fair trade to be able to put solar penetrations out in the valley and let the local community get some of that, revenue stream back for those services. I don't know, maybe I'm crazy.
Well, I don't think you're crazy. I think you're talking about a couple different things in there, and I think it gets to a little bit of virtual net metering and being able to credit certain folks for producing power and bill credit transfers basically, and community solar, which is different from community choice aggregation in the parlance. Community solar, this thing where you've got a single solar installation and multiple basically customers can participate or benefit from that, and community choice, which is the agencies that basically purchase power and can construct assets, but it's an agency that serves its customers electricity. I see your hand up there, sir.
Yeah, a couple of questions for Gabby, actually. Number one, wondering if your organization works with the PACE program at all.
At this point, no, we don't.
Okay, second question. Would you be an agency who could work with the housing authority on a redevelopment project to bring solar in on top of new buildings and structures?
That's a great question. So for right now, as we're a very young organization, we're working only with 501c3 nonprofits and worker-owned co-ops for a couple of specific reasons. One, again, it's a market that's not being served, and we want to fill that gap. But two, we don't really want to step on other folks' toes. So there are people working with affordable housing units with solar. And I think something that we really like about our own work is that we like to say that we're a marketing organization for the whole industry. So we're really interested in not competing with other organizations. That being said, as our model expands, I think that's something we'd really be interested in getting into. Same with public schools, because they require a lot more red tape than what we're have the capacity to deal with at this point. But it's something we'd be really interested in, absolutely.
Yes?
Hi, my name is Lisa Altieri. I live locally here. I work with the nonprofits working on residential outreach on climate solutions. But I have also been working sort of as a volunteer to support the two county county programs and launching and supporting that after happening and the cities on board. And so both of those counties now are getting really close to where they're going to start to design the programs. And so all of us are having this conversation here locally about, well, what kind of programs do we want to see? So I wanted to ask, maybe each of you could say, what would be your wish list? What would be the top one or two programs that you would want to see these two counties put into their plans in the beginning?
I guess we can go down the line. Well, it's interesting. I was thinking about this at this morning's panel. I was in the programs panel. And, we're working in a lot of states with a lot of really tough solar policies. So I'm working in Milwaukee, Wisconsin right now and about to begin working in Madison, working in Philadelphia, in a low-income neighborhood of North Philly. And if I had a wish list of things that we were not running into, it would be extensive. But there's so many ways that solar can be facilitated by smart policies at the local level. So I think one is a stable either net metering or feed-in tariff program. So I was interested this morning in seeing how clean, community choice can allow communities to have a say in what those policies look like, as opposed to being beholden to utility policies, which can be really unreliable and which are quick to change because they're not exactly the favorite of a lot of utilities. Right now, Maine is having like a major shift. We're also going to be starting working in Maine. That's why I know that. Having a major shift in how they're doing that. So I think stable policies of how people are credited for solar, businesses or residential, is really important, because it's difficult to carry out any sort of long-term either power purchase agreement or capital lease. We actually do a capital lease, but we're still guaranteeing savings or attempting to guarantee savings at the beginning of that lease. And it's so difficult to do that if that's up in the air. So I think something that's stable and that works is really exciting to us.
I would say, if there's, this is all new to me, so I'm learning about it, but I'd say if there's some kind of policy language that we can implement to make sure that the funding streams that are produced from community choice from the very beginning are prioritized in the most impacted communities. As I've said before, that is an area where that's a battle that we've been fighting for too long, and we still don't see those communities that are impacted. We don't see the benefit of some of the funding streams that are coming through locally and statewide. So my wish list would be, if we could implement some kind of policy language to protect those communities. Another possible idea, and I think about this because just yesterday one of our member organizations announced that there's a big power project that was going to be developed in Kern County, and it was finally shut down, and it's not going to be developed as HECA, Hydrogen Energy California, if anyone's familiar with it. And after several years of fighting it, it's finally gone. And that was an interesting partnership between clean air advocates and the local agricultural community. So you had farmers with, posters and protesting, to various meetings, and it's very rare. I haven't seen that ever in the Valley. So if community choice could bring together unconventional partners, I think that would be really great in the Valley as well.
I was thinking we're working real closely with the environmental justice community. There's an organization called California Environmental Justice Alliance, CEJA, and they've worked on policy issues on the state level and had some success in legislation that is going to provide solar for low-income folks. So you take that, you take some of the AB 32 funds, you take a look at the $1 billion fine that SoCal Gas is going to hit for their gas leak recently. You start to take all of those programs and wrap them into your policy. I think you have a much better chance.
And I'll try a little bit of an answer to that, which is that my understanding of the recent net energy metering decision at the CPUC is that there's a piece of it around virtual net metering that's still to be fully determined and fleshed out. And what virtual net metering allows, and I think it's a program that would be great for community choice agencies to be able to include in their basket, is a program of virtual net metering that allows for again, multiple users from a single solar installation at, for example, a multi-unit dwelling to reap the benefits of that photovoltaic installation. So community choice should be engaged in that discussion, and I think that would be a program that I would love to see the community choice agencies take on. Yeah.
Thank you.
And just for clarification, we do have PNM. We made sure that PNM was virtual net metering was equally accessible for CCA customers for utility customers. So
I couldn't quite hear that.
sorry. That we fought this battle several years ago about ensuring that that CCA customers have equal opportunity to access virtual net energy metering as utility customers do. So
Good. Thank you for fighting that battle. I see a new hand right here. Let's go here first, and then we'll go over there.
Hello, my name is Katie. I'm with the Civics Park program in San Luis Obispo. And I was just curious about the solar farm project that you were talking about, Ken. Was that the Topaz Solar?
It was Topaz and SunPower.
Okay. Would you mind expanding on that, about how the apprentice program worked in SLO?
Well, yeah, I actually could expand on that. Justin knows some of these folks. I recruited 4 students from Cal Poly to help me develop that program. We had funding from the California Conservation Corps, because they wanted a pathway into energy efficiency. And then we had Cuesta College as a partner, and then we also had the labor unions. And basically we developed that program as a pathway to fill the pipeline for workers that were needed. Because there's not enough electricians in San Luis Obispo County to do that. So you need to train new people and also bring in people from other areas to do that work.
Cool. Yeah, I actually drove past that solar farm. It was kind of impressive.
Yeah, and in fact, just another segue to that, there was also another group that we had in San Luis Obispo. We did a project we won a grant with the California Energy Commission to do a RESCO evaluation. RESCO stands for Renewable Energy Secure Communities. So what we developed was a resource map of a number of different technologies, from solar, and solar being utility scale to rooftop to parking lots. We had wind, we had biomass, we had combined heat and power, a number of different technologies, and we proved up that about 10 times the resources that the county uses are available from those renewable sources. And then those models are available for other cities to use also. We're planning on applying that in Los Angeles County as well.
I'll endorse that program. 3 of my family members are part of it. 2 of them are going on to work on another solar project in Monterey County as a result.
Which family members?
My stepdaughter and her significant other and a grandson.
Cool.
So I think we had a question over here.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up with you, Ken, on, I think you referenced earlier sort of a historical conflict, possibly from the labor union perspective with community choice. And wanted to, if you were looking at a CCA being formed now, what would you look for in that formation that would help, from a labor perspective, help you feel supportive of that CCA?
Well, here we are in Silicon Valley. There's, I think it's local 551, or maybe it's 541, and those electrical contractors from Cupertino Electric to Rosendin Electric, they're doing most of the work for Apple and Google and that high tech, because those buildings are becoming much more high tech. So they're having the contractors that have the skill set to do it. So what we did in LA is reached out to that contractor base and also the training center and brought them in as partners right from the beginning. Partners that are going to invest significant amounts of capital into this program as well. They've indicated that their pension funds are going to be invested in our community choice energy program in LA County as well. So I would say engage with them at the beginning for the design, because part of the design has been power purchase agreements and RECs, and then normal wholesale power contracts when that mix mostly is natural gas. Really haven't had a design of a local microgrid and that renewable energy resources from the ground up. Because I think it's more cost effective if you design that in right from the beginning and phasing it in over a course of a 10, 15-year period.
Yes, I mean, I guess just on that point, I mean, just as MCE, we are already doing that, so I mean,
No, I'm not saying you're not doing it. I'm just saying that at the beginning, it wasn't designed in because there was so much oppression. You asked about the labor issues that were oppressive. There was a big split in the labor movement because you got the utility labor thinks they're going to lose jobs with CCA. Then you got the local contractor labor force that says we're going to get jobs with CCA. So they were totally conflicted, but the utilities had more power in the state. So that's where that policy was coming from, but there's been fragmentation of that policy, and the local unions in San Diego and Los Angeles both are supporting the CCA efforts.
And I want to call on myself and ask you, has there been any, because I know that, Marin has bilateral contracts with, with unionized projects. And Sonoma Power, my question is there any kind of sea change underway now with the locals, among themselves, saying, okay, wait a minute, this community choice, or is that still a stalemate between the utility aligned?
No, I think there has been a sea change, or you wouldn't see the Los Angeles labor folks being up on the panel with the county saying, we're supporting this, we're working.
And they're not getting flack from Local 18 down there? Local 18 is the
SoCal
Edison alignment.
No, we're not, because when you take a look at what they were talking about to get into the microgrid, so you're taking the solar and the storage and putting that together, SoCal Edison just announced a huge $12 billion in distributed generation infrastructure build out. So now working with that build out of that infrastructure as opposed to being opposed by PG&E, that's occurring. So we're not getting that because they're going to see more jobs actually with community choice because they're going to build out a smarter grid.
Okay, Jude?
It's kind of in alignment with what you're hearing in the last section, kind of the longer term goal of opening up competition as far as building out these other services. And there was talk of, well, transition out of the old model, we got to provide some way for the utilities to make money on that. But there wasn't any, and because the old model was the utilities made their money on building, the big transmission lines instead of the new services and the new, microgrids and those new technologies. So they talked about taking care of the utilities to get the political possibility of changing the business model, but there isn't any talk about, well, what about labor that was connected to that old model? What do you see that needs to happen as far as maybe a just transition, or how do we, how easy as it is for those union workers to make that transition so that they can politically support this kind of restructuring of how we, compensate our utility.
Just so happens that you should ask. We've got an academic team that's working on a research project on that. So it's going to take a look at job loss, job gain with a CCA with a utility.
And I know there may be net jobs, but it's not the same people. So what do you do for the folks that are out of work, or how do you bring them along politically?
Right now, the utilities, when they went to smart meters, they didn't have much of a just transition for all those meter readers. They just lost their jobs. SoCal Edison just announced huge layoffs because they're restructuring. Then you got to go to the fundamentals in the utility industry. If you look at any of the utility magazines that deal with energy, there's a big transition of what you would call the dinosaur model for the last 80 years, and it's moving into a new. Some of the utilities are moving into that area. SoCal Edison is making a huge investment. Combination of they lost San Onofre, a big generator, so now they really needed to shift into a job creation and a different model, and they don't have a gas utility. Pacific Gas and Electric has got a gas utility, and half of the power load is going to gas centralized power plants. San Diego Gas and Electric's got a gas utility. Edison does not. So they don't have as much conflict. They can be a more nimble utility, and they've seen the light to move into that direction. And there will be some planning. I mean, if there's any specific job losses, there'll be some just transition into that plan also. My gut feeling is there's not going to be much loss. There's going to be more increase because that distribution network is going to be need to be hardened for security, and it's going to have to be more resilient and smarter. So those are that's job growth.
Okay, we've got about 5 more minutes. Are there any other, sir?
Yeah, Ben Foster. I have a question for you. In Central Valley, especially, or other parts of the state, what are the messages that are resonating now as you're trying to talk about the CCE relative to other choices? Because clearly, as you stated earlier, the oil and gas extraction seems to be very successful in deploying as many wellheads as possible. So we're going against the incumbent there as well. So what are the messages that are working right now that are well received, and are there any that are particularly not well received?
Messages in regards to oil and gas.
Formation and some of the opportunities.
Well,
So I'll actually help answer that, because the discussion really hasn't started yet in this era, let's say, because for folks that don't know, the San Joaquin Valley was actually formed the first community choice agency, the San Joaquin Valley Power Authority, back in the mid-2000s with this specific mission of serving with lower rates. Not so much a greenhouse gas reduction mission or renewable energy mission, but it was all about rates. And think about the timing. They were sort of on a track to launch roughly around 08, 09, and kablam, the recession hit, right? And theirs was all based on numbers and lower rates, and so that just went out the window. And so that agency ultimately folded. So it no longer exists, and the renewed conversation has not yet begun. So there really is no answer to that question yet, because the question hasn't been posed to the folks in, we're looking at Stockton, San Joaquin County, Fresno County, and Visalia, Tulare County as places where there really isn't a discussion underway yet, but we're going to be looking at working together to inspire a discussion. So we'll see how, but yeah, I can tell you I did take a trip out to the Central Valley in January. And across the board, folks I talked to out there said, don't lead with green or climate or greenhouse gases or anything like that. It's local control, local economic benefit, jobs, resilience, independence. You can talk long and deep about all kinds of benefits and potential benefits of community choice before you ever say anything about greenhouse gases. And that's one of the wonderful things about it is that there are so many co-benefits, let's call them. Other questions? I'm not seeing any hands. Any other comments? Did you?
Oh, I have a question for
Sure.
Gavriella.
Sure.
Do you guys work with grid alternatives at all?
We're good friends with them, yeah. So our project types, as I mentioned before, they're working with affordable housing, we're working with nonprofits. But we both have student programs, and I've been in touch with the student coordinator there of how our students can get involved in their work and they can be involved in ours. And we were potentially looking at a project in Colorado last year. It didn't end up going through, but with Grid, so they only install where they have offices, which is Colorado, in the Mid-Atlantic region, and in California. But we're really interested in partnering with them for an install if we work in one of their territories in the future. We also have a couple projects in the pipeline in the East Bay, working with a few African American churches, and it's in that community that the church serves, there are Grid projects, and so we're really interested in collaborating with them for educational outreach efforts in that community. So one aspect, and to touch on, bless you, to touch on communication and like sort of how do you sell these programs to folks. That's something that we deal with a lot. That's a huge part of our mission, is how do we talk to people about solar who maybe aren't in that conversation yet. I think what you're absolutely right is how do we talk about jobs? How do we talk about bringing things local and making local economies stronger? So for example, in Philadelphia, one of our projects that we're doing there is for something called Serenity House, which is a mission of the United Arch Street Methodist Church. If you know Philly, it's the big church in the middle. But Serenity House is this small organization in North Philly, and it's a disadvantaged community. I actually got to go visit Serenity House and meet some of the folks that they serve in December. It was a really incredible, really inspiring group of people. And what they're doing is they're having community members shadow the installation so that they can be trained in the green jobs economy. So when you're thinking about these sorts of communities, I think you're exactly right. It's not about, for people whose basic needs aren't being met, it's not about the big picture climate change aspect. It's about how can we choose what's happening in our economy. Because I think that sort of lack of independence, especially in oil and gas communities and fracking communities, is something that even though those jobs are so entrenched, that they're still at the hands of someone else, and those decisions change all the time and they're not always beneficial. But the concept of, well, what if we could have the jobs? What if we could determine what's happening here? What if we can create something? I think that's really exciting and something that we're excited to explore with our local installers that we work with. Thanks for the question.
We're working with Grid Alternatives as well. We got a series of town halls planned with Sierra Club leading it. And that gives them a forum to reach it, because the solar marketers have been hitting home so hard that some of those low income have been hit 5, 6, 7 times. So Grid Alternatives comes in and says we can do it for free, and nobody's listening. Not nobody, but it's a much tougher road for them.
All right, well, we are pretty much at time, so to keep in the tradition of this symposium so far, maybe we'll end on time, and it's a real good positive note to end on, I think. So thank you so much to our panelists. And thank you all for joining us.